You were taught vulnerability was weakness by the same people that hurt you and needed you quiet, numb, and easy to control. But the truth is, weakness isn't crying. Weakness is pretending you're fine when you're breaking on the inside. Weakness is armor that is so thick you can't hear your own heartbeat anymore. Welcome back to Unzipped Lips again. I'm your hostess, Mary Freshwater, and we're in a space where we unzip the truth and speak the things most people are not willing to talk about. And today is no different when we're not just talking about softness, we are talking about real strength, the kind that can be felt, spoken, chosen, and you can still stand. This is vulnerability at its finest. And I want to go through the differences of being guarded and vulnerable. And I want to twist and change your mind on the verbiage weakness to guarded. Because most of the time when we have gone through things, we've had to adapt to what was unsafe, unhealthy, which was traumatizing us, our fight or flight. We had to become guarded. We had to become aware. We had to become hyper vigilant to knowing what to do next because these things, being vulnerable, meant we were opening ourselves up to unsafe things and being hurt yet again. So we had to become guarded. So when you think about weakness, it's like, yes, you don't have the strength yet to let those guards down. So when we start to think about things a little bit different, we can start to understand why it's there. And don't fault yourself for being where you are, but start to understand why it's there and how to strengthen yourself so you can let those guards down and be able to move yourself forward. That is one of the biggest things about Unzipped Lips is I want to expose your mind to something different. So hopefully you can get yourself unstuck because being stuck sucks. And all I want to do is help give you a different way of thinking about something that might help you and be able to move forward in this different aspect of thinking of things not as weakness, but as guarded, especially in this aspect of vulnerability versus being guarded and why it's there. So I want to break down vulnerability in 4 different aspects: emotional, mental, physical, and sexual. And the reason why I want to start with emotional is because it doesn't matter what you've gone through, whether it's a car accident, actual abuse, negative experiences, it all impacts you emotionally at the end of the day. And you start to become guarded because this world is cruel and it will come after you repeatedly, where you feel like you have to be guarded all the time when you really don't. And how being emotionally guarded can typically look like is the simplest thing is I'm fine when you're not. That is being so emotionally guarded because you have been taught that if you tell someone the truth, you have to explain it or you have to do this. Or if someone knows something, they're going to weaponize it against you. Yeah, this world has taught you that. But when you're being vulnerable to yourself in saying, it's a struggle today. When someone asks you how you're doing, instead of being like, I'm fine, and putting a guard up, that you slowly put a guard back up inside yourself. I mean, a simple truth that you can say is, it's a day. It's a day. They don't need to know more than that. You don't owe anybody any explanation further than that. And when they say, what does that mean? Be like, It's a day, and you can just keep moving along. Something so stupidly simple like that can start to change how you're staying vulnerable to yourself and not staying guarded or rebuilding that guard up. And that's one of the biggest things is you have to be vulnerable with yourself before you can be vulnerable with everyone else. So when you repeatedly say, I'm fine to the world, you put that guard right back up. But what about when you're in an uncomfortable situation and someone's being just a little facetious and all you can do is shut down instead of speaking up for yourself? Because you were taught if you spoke up for yourself, you would get hurt more. So now shutting down is guarding yourself where you're not going to get hurt. You're not going to be put into a negative situation. But the truth is, all you're doing is minimizing yourself. You're not being true to who you are. You're not being true to your feelings that someone is being rude, toxic, and needs to shut up and get out. Now, there's ways of doing that respectfully. And as you come into your own and start to learn your own voice and stick up for yourself, you'll figure it out. And one of the hardest things to overcome, though, is being explosive instead of expressive. That is the biggest guard you could have, is exploding, because it is an instant push away for anybody. If you explode, it is the fastest guard you have. You severed old connections. You're fine. You're good. No one's coming near you on that one. So let's really look at that, because at some point emotionally, you were taught that your emotions were inconvenient, unsafe, or dismissed, punished, or were so overwhelming you couldn't regulate yourself, and you became so dysregulated you don't even know how to reset. So this guard is up all the time. You learned this. You learned that these feelings meant losing control, losing safety, losing everything. So you, again, adapted to silence, and that silence kept you guarded. But when it really comes down to it, weakness in being guarded isn't feelings. It's avoiding what you feel. You shut down so you don't have to feel it. You explode so you don't have to feel. You say, I'm fine, so you don't have to feel. These keep you guarded. And there are ways of starting to slowly bring that guard down. One of the things is being vulnerable by just saying, I feel this. You don't have to explain yourself. You owe no explanation to anybody but yourself. Understanding why you feel that way helps you stay vulnerable, helps you understand why those emotions are there. You can say, I need space. There's nothing wrong with needing space. You're communicating. You're being vulnerable. That hurt me. That hurt deep. These are things that once you start saying them, you start slowly becoming vulnerable. Even if you're just saying these to yourself in a mirror and being able to understand that this is safe. Now, it's not safe to expose it to everybody, but not everybody has a right to be in your life and to see you vulnerable. Being vulnerable is a decision that you make. Not everybody gets your vulnerability. There are people in this world you have to stay guarded to. And I'm going to be the first one to say that. There are people that I can't be vulnerable with, and that is okay. But I am 100% vulnerable with myself, and I know how to keep myself safe. And that is okay. Because it's not a collapse. This is emotional literacy. When you can understand yourself emotionally and be vulnerable with yourself emotionally, you can then decipher who gets to see that. Now, being emotional vulnerable in my last episode, I'm going to be honest, like I said, then is not trauma dumping. It is not just blah on people. No, it is being honest with yourself and it is being honest with the people who have earned that vulnerability. Vulnerability isn't something you just give to somebody. They need to earn that from you. And I can't express that enough that your vulnerability is sacred to you, but you need to be vulnerable with yourself first so then you can learn how to expose and be vulnerable with others. In mental vulnerability, nah, that one is a hard one because it you you're being mentally challenged all the time from people around you, especially if you're in a corporate work environment. You have emotional strain all the time. Typically in corporate America, you feel like you have to be mentally guarded and emotionally guarded. Emotionally guarded, I 100% agree with that. Being guarded in the workplace emotionally. Mentally guarded, this one's harder because if you're mentally guarded in a workplace, that can actually hurt you in the long run because that is a place where mental vulnerability is actually sometimes a key to your success. Because when you're guarded, you get stuck in black and white thinking. You get stuck in not seeing shades of gray. And when you're in a place where you need to be mentally vulnerable, you got to be able to fluctuate mentally. You got to be able to see what's coming and going. And that's hard. And then also, like, when you're being mentally guarded, you have to be right all the time. I'm sorry, but the last time I checked, no boss wants a subordinate that thinks they're right all the time and is correcting them. That actually can stunt your professional growth. And it's exhausting when you're around someone that always needs to be right. This is how people stay mentally guarded, refusing new information. All right. And then weaponizing logic to avoid emotions. I get it. Like, mental vulnerability is, it's one of those fun ones. Because being mentally guarded is rigid thinking that once created safety. You get certainty that felt like control. Admitting you were wrong may have actually at one point brought shame, loss of power, and being emotionally overwhelmed. So your mind learned to defend instead of expand. You get stuck. You get stuck in your thinking and you don't have growth anymore when you are mentally guarded. But when you become mentally vulnerable, you start to understand that mental weakness hides behind certainty. So vulnerability chooses growth. That's when you start to get it. Admitting you don't know is okay. When a boss asks you what's up, why did you do this? Honestly, I don't know. Cool. How about in a relationship? Admitting you don't know. They ask you a question and you're like, I don't know, instead of making something up. Questioning old beliefs is huge. And I see this in religion the most. Like being mentally vulnerable means you open up yourself to what you may have been taught in your religious beliefs for 30 years. And someone shows you something biblically or somewhere in, you start to see like, ooh, okay, let's talk. Questioning old ideas, old beliefs. This is not a bad thing. This helps you grow. a, a challenge from episode one. A challenge is going to cause two things. You're going to either react or respond. Either you're going to become concrete in how you already feel, or you're going to grow. Questioning old beliefs is a good thing. Letting your mind be changed. Change is scary, especially when it comes to an ideology you've been holding on to because it made you safe. And now you question it and someone can change your mind. Woo, that might be scary. But that's mental vulnerability. Being able to say you're wrong. It takes strength to be able to do all of this. It takes power in yourself, ownership of growth, ownership of being okay with the safety you have created for yourself. You are the sole ownership of your safety. So if you're in unsafe environments, get yourself to safety. If you don't feel safe, create environments to feel safe. You are the only one who can make it so you feel safe. Now, others that are close to you, it is their job to protect you, and it is your job to protect them. But it is not anyone else's job to help you feel safe. In vulnerability, you need to feel safe with yourself and vulnerable with yourself. And the reason why I bring up safety so harsh is because physical vulnerability is huge with needing to feel safe. Otherwise, you are physically going to stay guarded. And this comes in many different ways, because if you don't like that you're physically getting older and you're not willing to be vulnerable with that because it doesn't feel safe, not a good thing. When you're physically guarded, you ignore your limits. You push past limits and you get hurt. If you have ever seen people in a gym before pushing themselves beyond limits, because physical weakness to them is so crucial that they can't feel that. And because that guard needs to be so hard and so strong, and they push themselves too far, and you just watch them ignore their limits. And I've seen some horrific injuries working in the fitness industry for years. It's hard to see that people get so guarded and needing to feel safe that they ignore their limits. They use their body like it's just a tool. I've seen men work themselves to death so fast because they just see their body as a tool to make money, to, get so focused, and they don't see where their body is not just a tool, it's a vessel. It holds your emotions, your mental sexuality. When you're using your body as a tool, you're hustling past your warning signs. But one of the biggest ones for being physically guarded is you treat burnouts like a badge of honor. You are so guarded physically that you don't see the own damage you are causing to your body. You are hustling, you are pushing, and you are running so hard because physically, if you yield, you feel like you are weak and you can't show physical weakness. Because at some point, slowing down felt unsafe, lazy, unproductive. You were punished because you took a breather. These were learned. You learned that your worth was only in how much you could do. So exhaustion became normal and disconnected from your body. This is the price of survival. You don't need to sit in that anymore because your body doesn't need to be dominated. It needs a partner. It needs someone who understands there's limitations. Your body will break down, and it takes everything with it when it does. All of these are connected. Your emotional, your mental, and your physical vulnerability and guards are all connected. They are intertwined. You emotionally are running from something, so you physically push harder over here. You are mentally exhausted here, so you emotionally are breaking down over here. You have to nurture and be vulnerable in all aspects of those in order to find a healthy place. You have to be able to see where you're struggling. Again, you have to be vulnerable with yourself in order to know how to move forward. When you are physically vulnerable, you actually let your body rest. You understand that connection of your physical self to the rest of you. You understand that you have physical limitations. So you listen to yourself and you understand it is time to slow down. Take a breather. You ask for help when you're exhausted. You ask for help when you hit your limit and you can't keep going. You acknowledge pain instead of pushing through it. These things are self-respect. When you are vulnerable with yourself, you actually have respect for yourself. And that, I guess that is something I should have spoken on earlier, because self-respect is a huge part of vulnerability, because being vulnerability with yourself helps open up everything else. Again, not everybody deserves to hear your story. Not everybody has earned to know your vulnerabilities. That's your choice, who earns it and who doesn't. But staying guarded to everybody and being guarded to yourself brings so much harm in every aspect. And when you are completely emotionally, mentally, and physically shut down, it actually all bleeds into your sexual vulnerability. You become so sexually guarded. And it sucks, because that is one of the biggest intimacies that in a relationship, when you're not vulnerable, it breaks down your relationship. Because I'm sorry, but the last time I checked, when you're sexually guarded, you're performing instead of connecting. And I'm sorry, but I'm not wanting to have someone who's putting on a performance. I mean, intimacy is so much better when it's real. Also, when you're guarded sexually, sex is all about validation and it's not about connection, because you're disassociating from that intimacy. That intimacy isn't there. It is not attached in the connection that you're wanting to have with someone. So when you're guarded, it allows people access to you that you may not want them to have access to you, because you don't know really how to say no, because you're seeking validation. Well, that might be the person who's going to give it to you, even though that's not who you want. It really sucks, because being sexually guarded, it just snowballs. And the biggest reason why this ends up happening is because at some point you were taught your body wasn't yours, that your body and access equals safety, worth, love, or survival. So you don't have boundaries. You don't know how to have them honored. Most people don't know what a sexual boundary is, that has been sexually abused or sex trafficked or was a sex worker, because typically all of those go to hand in hand. You got here because you were told your sex is linked to your worth. This is how you find love. It is through your sexuality. And that's not true. Connection isn't transactional. Let me say that again. Connection is not transactional. It's consensual. It is vulnerable. Connection is not that, even though we were taught that sexual, intimate, like sexual acts were transactional for safety or for connection. It's not right. So isn't being sexually guarded isn't about your desires. It's about disconnecting from choice. And when you're being vulnerable, you can express your needs. You can express your kinks. You can express your desires without feeling you're being judged when you're with the right person. Being sexual vulnerable means naming your boundaries and being able to stand by them, uphold them. Say yes when you mean yes and saying no with no guilt because you owe no one an explanation on why you're saying no. If you don't want it, you don't want it. No is no, and you can walk away. Letting yourself be emotional during intimacy is the biggest flex of vulnerability. I've had it happen a couple times. Still makes me queasy to think about, to be honest. So you're not alone there. But that's power. This is true power. When you are vulnerable in all these aspects of your life, especially in a relationship with someone who is healthy, you are seeking healthy, someone else is healthy. You guys are both on your own healing journeys. You're both being vulnerable. You have this amazing connection. Your intimacy goes through the roof. And it is one of the most beautiful things you can have is when you are able to be 100% vulnerable with someone. But you can only get there when you're willing to be vulnerable with yourself first. Because vulnerability requires a risk. Take a risk on yourself first. Take a risk on you, on understanding yourself, understanding why you feel the way. Why does this hurt this way? Take a risk. Because being guarded will always be choosing avoidance. Being weak and guarded, however you want to phrase it, will be choosing avoidance over and over. So stop at least being guarded with yourself first. Be vulnerable with yourself. And then start choosing people that you can start showing yourself to. Because the real you is pretty freaking amazing. And when you start to really live in vulnerability with yourself and with others, it starts to build integrity. You're able to be honest with yourself, which means you're able to stay honest with the world. You find the right words, even though you're scared to say them. And then you can start letting down that armor. Because being guarded just keeps building armor. And one of the things I do want to help reframe with you is you aren't afraid to be vulnerable. You were taught it was unsafe. So when you really think about that, you are afraid of being unsafe. So find and build that safety within yourself. And when you are being taught that you had to be this way, you adapted. And it's okay to stop living in that. Build your safety. You get to build your safety now so then you can be vulnerable. This is where the strength in you're out of this. You've survived it. And this strength now comes with giving yourself permission to be real. That is power. Power comes from choice, not protection. Power comes from living and from choice and ownership. Extreme ownership of who you are. That's some power. You have the power to be vulnerable. You have the power to be amazing. Own it. You're the one who gets to build the next phase and the next step and the next you. Own it. Go for it. Because being vulnerable is one of the biggest flex you'll ever have in this lifetime. Again, I want to say thank you for unzipping with me today. And don't forget to subscribe, to like, to share. I definitely love doing this with you guys. And if you want help on figuring out where you're struggling with your vulnerability, wanting to become more vulnerable, and check me out at buildyou.us and book a clarity call with me. I do only have a couple spots open currently with coaching, but I would love to talk with you and see if we're the right fit. Otherwise, to be able to start becoming vulnerable, another great tool that I have out there is a book called Build You After Trauma. You can find it on Amazon. It's a workbook. It is a big one for you, but I'm excited to again be able to unzip with you today. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.